Carlo Colaiacovo is with us. Let's get to the main reason why we got together this week. A little home and home between the Winnipeg Jets and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Jets had a number of streaks snapped last night in Boston. And we'll see as to how Mark Scheifele and Gabriel Velarde are feeling heading into the game on Wednesday night in TO. But just before we talk about this matchup, Carlo, I mean, you're doing tons of NHL analyst work on TSN. What are your thoughts about the Winnipeg Jets, who are still right there near the top of the league as we get well into the second half of the season?
You know what? My thoughts are with raring results. I love this team. The last 2 months, what I've seen this team do and how I've seen them play, I've even done a couple of games. I am so impressed with the brand of hockey that they're playing, because it's the brand of hockey you can see have success in the playoffs. I mean, they don't give you much offensively. They play a very detailed game. They play a very structured game. They play a very patient game, and they wear on you. That third line of Lowry, Niederreiter, and Appleton is hands down one of the most impressive bottom six lines in the league. And not just because of what they can do to you in a matchup defensively, but the offense that you can get from these guys too. And, you look at some of the successes of the teams. Yes, teams have elite players. Teams have star players. But when those star players don't show up, are they getting enough from the rest of their roster? And I look at this Winnipeg Jets team, and I don't even need to say that about them, because I wouldn't put any of their players in the elite category unless you're talking about Connor Hellebuyck, but they have enough players around the top players in this lineup that you can count on to get the job done, not just offensively, but to get the job done defensively when you need a big play to be made. And I think because of that, it's almost a contagious feeling that when you see everybody in the lineup playing the same way, it builds confidence, and a confidence that the Winnipeg Jets have had over the last 2 months, where they know they can beat anybody because they don't give the other team much. I mean, that record that was ended yesterday, you know how impressive that is? 35 straight games in an era of hockey where all we want to see is more offense, where they don't give up 3 or more goals. And I love DeMello's comment after the game that should be an asterisk because of the empty netter. But that is so much to stand on, for a team like the Winnipeg Jets, knowing that, they probably won't compete with the best teams in the league offensively, but they make it hard on you to try to get anything against them. And there's a reason why, they are as good as they are. Defensively, they're sound. They play a very simple, detailed game. They get great goaltending no matter who's in net. And to think this was supposed to be a year with so much unpredictability with this team, with the potential of no Hellebuyck, no Scheifele, you trade Dubois. People wonder, where would this team go? Well, sometimes the best moves you make are the ones you don't make. And for the Winnipeg Jets, keeping Scheifele, keeping Hellebuyck, and then getting extreme value for Dubois that helped round out the rest of this roster has reaped benefits for this team. And I absolutely love them. I think, I've been saying it for over a month. Stop sleeping on the Jets, because this team is for real. They can play with anybody.
You mentioned the streak of 3 goals or less. I think maybe even more impressive, Carlo. And this was broken last night too. But 22 straight games of 2 goals or less in regulation. They gave up a third goal, a power play goal against the Habs in December. You had to go all the way back to November 30th before 3 went in the net in regulation. And even in that game, it was an empty netter. From a player's standpoint, when you are a team that's obviously maybe greater than the sum of its parts, how would you describe the momentum that a team gets on with their consistency and like a foundation of great 5-on-5 play, which is what the Jets have, because they certainly haven't been leaning on their special teams as much. I mean, how hard is it to get to that point, but how effective can that be playing against teams that, as you mentioned, might have some more high-end, super high-skilled players, but at the end of the day, it comes down to being a team game every night.
Yeah, and look, in the NHL, it's clear that talent, oversees everything, right? But when you're talking about winning, it's the teams that buy into playing a team game, because it is, you talk about 7-game series. It's not always the teams with the best players that advance the furthest. It's always the teams that play like a team and understand the differences between winning and losing can do for you. And I think for Winnipeg, winning is the ultimate cure to all problems. And when you're playing this way that they're playing, but you're getting the results, it helps you feel more confident about yourself. And I think that's what's helped this whole process with the Winnipeg Jets, because I think the players on that team would probably admit too, to start this season, nobody really knew what type this season was going to be. But because they kept finding ways to get wins, it just instills a belief in the team that maybe they didn't think they had, but now they know they can play with, because they're getting the results. So winning is the ultimate cure to all your problems. And in a league where there's so much parity too. I mean, you look at the Eastern Conference standings, the cluster of teams that could potentially be in a playoff spot, out of a playoff spot on a nightly basis, that just goes to show, how much more credit a team like Winnipeg should get, because they've been able to sustain it consistently, doing it with some big guys, big name players out of the lineup. I mean, you've missed Scheifele for a couple of games, you've missed Carter for a couple of games. They've had some injuries on the back end. Guys have been in and out. That they've had a nice plug and play system where the next guy up has been able to fill a role quite nicely.
Yeah, and Bones talked about that yesterday. I mean, that they really haven't had the extended injury to Velarde, and then which just sort of overlapped. I mean, played a couple games, and then Kyle Connor was out for a long time. We'd like to see all those guys get back together, and we'll have fingers crossed that Scheifele's able to play. It's always a big game for Ontario guys to play in Toronto. Well, what about the Leafs? I mean, as we go into tonight's action, they are in a playoff spot, a shockingly low number of regulation wins, and it seems that, with all the, heck, a lot of people were firing Sheldon Keefe last week. I mean, what is this team 45 games in right now, Carlo? And should people be bullish about the future, or really concerned that this team hasn't been better so far this season?
Well, I think they're they're a slightly above average team, and anybody who sees otherwise probably doesn't have a good understanding of this team. They're a team with very good players. They don't score a lot of their problems, but you can only get away with that for so long. I mean, for the early parts of the season, they had to deal with injuries in the back end, injuries in net. And luckily, it's been their top guys that have been able to carry the load and lead the way. I mean, on most nights, they need 4 or 5 goals to win a hockey game. And that's why you're not seeing many regulation wins. And, I was very confused about, the construction of the roster in the offseason, because, you lose guys like Justin Hall, you lose guys like Luke Schenn that played important roles for this team. Hall in the regular season and Luke Schenn, especially in the playoffs. And you replace him with an offensive guy that is worse defensively in John Klingberg. That was your big addition on the blue line. And so they didn't really fill any holes. If anything, they created more. And to go into the season and believe that type of defense would allow you to have the success that you envisioned with this group was probably a poor evaluation. And then they know that, they recognize that, they're trying to change it, but clearly they're not getting any help changing it, because either the market hasn't been established of who's available, or they just don't have the depth internally. Now, they did find out about their group is guys like Simon Benoit, guys like Lagesson, and even guys like Connor Timmins, who have been getting extended playing time. They are good depth defensemen, but when you look at this defense, I look at it and I see one really good defenseman. That's Morgan Rielly. And that's sort of what's hurt this team in getting over the hump, because their top 6 is as good as any top 6 in the league, if not one of the best top 6 in the league. They can score. They're dangerous. They're a team that can, come back in games. Through 2-3 goal deficits. They even did it in a 5-goal deficit in one period against Columbus. But, the problem with this team, compared to, how much I praise the Jets, is that they have holes. They don't play a committed team defensively game. Their mistakes in holding leads, in protecting leads late in games, catch up to them because, they're just not that talented on the back end. And, they've had patchwork goaltender and people talk in this market where they would be without Martin Jones. And that's a fair question because he's come in as a third guy and given them some unbelievable games and obviously giving them a great chance to win those games. So that's the problem with this team is they're so top heavy. They don't have a well enough rounded roster. Guys like Bertuzzi and Domi were supposed to come in and bring something different to this group. And I think they have on a small sample size, but not enough on a bigger scale. So I think the fact that those guys haven't met the level of expectation or production has held this team back a bit. I think they're going to be a team that scrapes to get a playoff spot unless they make some significant upgrades under their back end.
Well, and, it's easier said than done because they've got about $75 of cap space right now. And, it's money in, money out. And speaking of that, what's going on with Ryan Reaves?
Yeah,
I'm sure you guys have talked about this on the show over the last couple of days. I mean, on the weekend, he said, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm good to go." I mean, is this just a power play to force him to be activated again? And is there a spot for Reaves going forward in the lineup? I know they signed him to a 3-year deal, but it doesn't seem like they've in any rush to get the big guy back in.
Yeah, Andrew, only in Toronto do people love to spend a lot of time and energy on a player that's slotted in as the 12th forward on this team. I've never had a problem with the Reaves signing because you know what you're going to get with him. And there's a lot of people that have spent a lot of time and energy saying, "Oh, it was a terrible signing. We didn't need him. Why'd you give him a 3-year deal?" Look, that was the cost of bringing in a guy like that. And you got to understand why you bring him in. He's going to bring an element that this team has desperately needed physically, even just with the personality that he is. It's uplifting. Nobody was complaining about that in the first 2 weeks of the season when you saw the impact he was having, being physical and fighting guys and, obviously being a very vocal guy in the room. So those are the positives. I think what happened to Ryan Reaves was obviously an injury. An injury happened with him that allowed this team to get used to life without him, and it's cost him his job. And it's unfortunate, but that's the business of hockey. He's got to just sit there and wait his time. I know believe me, I've been in that spot too. It's not an easy thing to accept. It's not an easy thing to digest either. But, with his absence, they've had other guys step up and play more significant roles, or at least contribute in a more significant role that he was providing for this team, where, it allowed Sheldon Keefe to roll 4 lines evenly instead of when he was in the lineup. Sheldon Keefe didn't trust him to be out there in certain minutes because of the stat that was around saying, "Oh, he's been on the ice for this many goals" and stuff like that. Ultimately, I think that was more of a team problem than an individual problem. So I don't really know what the answer is for Ryan Reaves. I think, my advice to him would just be, to stay patient. He being a good team guy. There's still a lot of hockey left to be played. He's probably going to get in another game or two. But don't be a distraction, right? Don't be a guy that's constantly, sending, quotes into the media that's going to create something that the coaches don't want to have a conversation about. And I'm not saying that he is that guy, but in this market, those are things that can obviously be escalated. And that's something that he doesn't really need right now. He's a guy that's been out of the lineup. It's an unfortunate fate that he has to accept, and until the coaches believe otherwise, to get him back in. Right now, there's other guys that bring more of this team that he was bringing, and that's why the coaches decided to stick with this lineup.
Carlo Colaiacovo of TSN, and first up with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk, getting ready for back-to-back games between the Winnipeg Jets and Toronto Maple Leafs. Wednesday night in TO, Saturday night back here in Winnipeg, heading into the player break. So, Carlo, I mean, when you look at these next 2 games, I mean, what intrigues you about this matchup, and what do you sort of expect to see from both teams, considering the nature of you're only going to do it once? Well, twice in a season. It's in the same week. Not to mention going into the player break and All-Star festivities afterwards.
Well, I'll start from a Leaf perspective. I'm intrigued to watch a team that I think a lot of the Leaf fans want the Maple Leafs to be, right? A four-line team, good defensively, have great goaltending that gives you a chance to win every night. But not just that, a team that plays a heavy brand of hockey. They wear you down. They get in your face. And who's kidding who? Look at the last time these two teams have played. You would think that there was a rivalry between this group because of how spirited these matchups ended up being. So I don't expect there to be that much of a change in these next two matches, especially when you're playing on a back-to-back. And maybe this is a game in a series where you do bring back Ryan Reaves just because of a game you do expect to play against Winnipeg. But on the Leafs perspective, they're coming off of a really long Western road trip, and I never really feel good when teams come back off of those games. Because it takes a little bit of an adjustment to get back and feel like yourself again. And they're going to it's a good test for them, right? I mean, I know they played a really good defensive game in Seattle, and maybe that's something they want to build off of. And, what Winnipeg really tests when they play you is they test your patience. Can you stick to playing a patient game where you're focusing on the simple plays? Because if you don't, they can make you pay. They'll force you to turn the puck over. And, they're very opportunistic. On Winnipeg's side, I think they're coming off one of their most lopsided losses in a long time. So
there haven't been many.
Yeah, you probably got a pissed off group that's looking to rebound, and it's looking at Toronto as, a game that's going to get a lot of attention, and they want to, have a bounce back game. So I think it's a good test for both teams. And ultimately, what I hope to see is just a great hockey game.
We're going to see two of the best in the National Hockey League, of course, Connor Hellebuck when it comes to goaltending. But I just have to ask you about the season that Auston Matthews is having. You can't lay any Leaf struggles on 34 right now. No. He is, every single night it seems like he's lighting the lamp. I mean, just how special of a campaign has this been for Auston?
And it's been extremely special. I honestly think people in Toronto here sometimes take that for granted because of how critical they want to be between wins and losses. And the thing I just try to remind people is Toronto's lucky to have one of the best players, one of the best evolved goal scorers in the game in Auston Matthews play for their team, and watch him play on a nightly basis, because to see what he's able to do and the impact he can have on every game just by almost scoring every game, it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch. And then when you complement that with guys like Marner and Nylander, and Tavares has been on the struggle bus lately, pointless in his last 8 games, something that we haven't really seen him do throughout his tenure here. You got to appreciate it. And I know it comes with criticism because it's a team that can't get the results at the most important time of the year. And yeah, maybe they change that a little bit next year. People are always looking forward to April with this group, but you can't get to April without being as good as they are in the regular season. And I think we take that for granted here a little bit. And, and it'll be fun to watch him, try to beat Connor Hellebuck, the guy that's been literally probably the leading candidate right now for the Vezina Trophy winner because of the year that he's had. So, I wish the NHL would find a way to get him on more national TV games, so the rest of the hockey world can watch him. But it's clearly a treat. And, the expectation that's put on him every year because of the pace that he scores at, 50, 60 goals. I always thought it was an unfair one because it's hard to score 50 goals in a season. And when you're expected to do that before the puck that drops before the first game, it could put a lot of pressure on the guy. But this guy just doesn't seem to bother him. He finds himself at the right place at the right time. And I think he's lucky enough to play with the players that he plays with that puts him in those spots.
Well, he seemingly put the team on his back last week in Calgary when the world was crumbling around the Leafs. And anyways, things have settled down a little bit, but I imagine it'll be a pretty great atmosphere in both buildings for these games on Wednesday and Saturday.